I've been talking about the stories that'll outlive us. Recently, I've talked about some books that that I read in high school that I reread as an adult just because, well, it's a sign of the times, you know. So this one's about Fahrenheit 451. I don't know if you read that book, but I'm gonna talk about it a little while. So scoot up next to the campfire. I just threw another log on. We're going to talk about a book that was written in 1953, but somehow feels more relevant every single day. Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. Now, when people hear about this book, they remember one thing: firemen. But in this book, the firemen weren't like the ones we have today where they go out putting out fires. These firemen burned the books. And that's an image that sticks with people because it feels backwards. Firefighters are supposed to save things, but in this world, their job was destruction. You ever thought about Fahrenheit 451, what the title means? 451 degrees, that's the temperature that paper ignites. That single idea made one of the smartest literary concepts ever written because Bradbury understood something. He understood something important long before the internet existed. If you control information, you eventually control society itself. If you own the information, you can bend it all you want to. And if you control the past, you control the future. Now, like I said, Fahrenheit 451 refers to the temperature at which paper supposedly burns. And in Bradbury's future society, books are illegal. Not discouraged, not debated, destroyed. Now you think about that today. We do a lot of reading on, well, some of us do some reading, but a lot of us do it on tablets and phones, and we use apps. Those books can be easily edited. Easily. Not paper. In Bradbury's book, entire houses are burned if books are found inside them. And the government's justification sounds disturbingly familiar. Books make people uncomfortable. Books create disagreement. Books offend people. Books cause conflict. Books make people think too much. So society decides happiness matters more than truth, and comfort matters more than knowledge, and distraction matters more than thought. Here's where the story gets interesting. The main character, Guy Montag, starts out believing all this. He's a fireman, and he burns books for a living. At first, he really enjoys it. Bradbury describes Montag standing in front of flames almost like a man intoxicated by power. Burning ideas, burning history, burning memories itself. But then something changes. Montag meets a teenage girl named Clarice. Clarice may be one of the most important characters in dystopian literature because she does something dangerous. She asks questions, simple questions, real questions, questions modern society discourages. Questions like, are you happy? And honestly, some of the simplest questions are the most devastating. Clarice notices things: rain, wind, conversations, nature, human behavior, and she actually thinks that this makes her abnormal in this world because in the society of Fahrenheit 451, the society's drowning in entertainment. People spend their lives staring at giant television walls. You know, in our society, we spend our lives staring at small screens in our hand. Not much different, huh? There's constant noise, constant stimulation, constant distraction. No silence, no reflection, no deep thought, and no meaningful conversations. The more you read this book today, the more uncomfortable that becomes. And when you remember that Bradbury wrote this in 1953, even before I was born, there were no smartphones, no TikTok, no YouTube, no endless doom scrolling, no algorithm-driven outrage machines, and yet somehow he predicted a society addicted to shallow entertainment, emotional distraction. That's exactly what Fahrenheit 451 is, and that's why it's so frightening. Not because it feels impossible, because it feels plausible in today's world. Bradbury wasn't warning about government censorship. He was warning about a culture self-destructing. A society that stops wanting depth, stops wanting complexity, starts wanting difficult ideas, and eventually stops reading entirely. That distinction matters because most of misunderstood parts in Fahrenheit 451 is this: the government did not destroy reading overnight. Society abandoned it first. People chose convenience. They chose entertainment. People chose comfort. And then censorship became easy. And honestly, that may be the most revealing warning in the entire novel. Montague slowly begins realizing something is deeply wrong with this world. And one of his clearest examples is his wife, Mildred. Mildred spends nearly all of her time absorbed in the giant interactive television screen. The family on the screen matters more to her than real people. Does that sound familiar? Bradbury imagined people emotionally attached to artificial media personalities decades before social media influencers existed. Decades. Mildred barely talks to Montague. Their marriage is emotionally hollow. At one point, she even overdoses on sleeping pills and treats it like nothing happened. Nobody even seems shocked because society has become emotionally numb. And there's another major theme in the book. People surrounded by endless stimulation can still become spiritually empty. Maybe even more empty. Then we meet Captain Beatty. Beatty's fascinating because he's intelligent, very intelligent. He understands books. He quotes literature constantly, yet he supports censorship. Why? Because Beatty understands how power works. He explains that society gradually rejected complexity because people didn't want to uncomfortable ideas. I'm going to read that again. He explains that society gradually rejected complexity because people didn't want uncomfortable ideas. Does that sound like today's society? We're a soundbite driven society. We're all kinds of interested in sound bites and not much else, right? If we can't tell it in a 10-second sound bite, we don't even want to hear it. It's amazing, isn't it? Different opinions created tension, and books often offended groups. Arguments became exhausting. Boy, that sounds like social media right now. People that don't have any idea who they're talking to will argue with their neighbor about something that doesn't matter. And they pick their favorite political group to cheer for. And they're either red or they're blue. Neither one of them care anything about you. But they will spend all day arguing with their neighbor about it. I just think that's bad. And it's exactly what Fahrenheit 451 was talking about. So instead of learning to tolerate disagreement, society removed disagreement itself. Sounds kind of like cancel culture, doesn't it? Everything became simplified, fast, safe, emotionally easy. Can't offend anybody. And eventually the books became dangerous because the books forced people to think. Bradbury understood something many people still struggle with today. A population trained to avoid discomfort becomes easier to control. And that's what it's all about, right? Control. Because independent thought requires discomfort. Growth requires discomfort. Truth often requires discomfort. And books, real books, challenge people. One of the strongest moments in Fahrenheit 451 comes when Montag finally starts reading. Not scanning, not skimming. He starts reading the books. He starts thinking and reflecting. And suddenly he realized how shallow his world has become. And that's another thing Bradbury predicted accurately. Information overload does not automatically create wisdom. Sometimes it creates the opposite. People today consume enormous amounts of content, yet many struggle to focus deeply on anything for long periods of time. Short clips, short posts, short reactions, constant stimulation. As a matter of fact, this video that I'm recording right now, it's going to be about 20 minutes long. I'm going to cut it up into sections about 2 minutes each, and it'll get a whole bunch of views on the 2-minute sections. But the full 20-minute video won't get anywhere near the views of all the others if you add them up. Because we're looking for short clips, short posts, and short reactions. Bradbury feared a future where people lost the patience for deep thought and honestly look around. Then there's the Mechanical Hound, one of the creepiest symbols in the novel. This robotic creature hunts down dissenters, cold, efficient, and emotionless. It represents technological enforcement stripped of humanity. And once again, Bradbury's idea feels suddenly modern. Automated systems, surveillance technology. Think about how many cameras you pass every day. What about they're using drones now to enforce speed limit? Algorithmic behavior monitoring. If you don't do what the algorithm wants you to do, they shut you down. Machine-driven enforcement. Bradbury understood technology could become a tool, not just for convenience, but for control. And the scary part is, most people in the novel barely questioned it. And most people today barely question it because they've been conditioned not to. And that's the real horror of Fahrenheit 451. Not tyranny through brute force, tyranny through distraction. Don't you think about that for a minute now. Tyranny through distraction. So, freedom doesn't end with screams. It ends with rounding applause. Eventually, Montag rebels completely. He begins protecting the books instead of burning them. And that's transformation is symbolic. He moves from destroying memory to preserving it. From obedience to independent thought. From numbness to awareness. And that awareness changes him forever. Because once people start thinking critically, they become very difficult to manipulate. And that's why authoritarian systems throughout history have always feared writers, teachers, philosophers, and independent thinkers. Knowledge creates unpredictability. And predictability is what control systems want. Bradbury understood that deeply. Towards the end of the novel, society itself begins collapsing. War looms in the background of the entire time. Most people barely notice. Sounds like today, doesn't it? They're too distracted, too entertained, too emotionally disconnected to understand the danger surrounding them. And honestly, that may be Bradbury's sharpest observation. Civilizations sometimes decay while people remain distracted by entertainment. In Rome, they said bread and circuses, food and entertainment. Rome had its spectacles. Modern society has its very own. And Bradbury worried humanity could become so consumed by shallow stimulation that it would stop paying attention to reality itself. But here, Fahrenheit 451 is not completely hopeless. That's important. Near the end, Montag encounters people preserving books by memorizing them. Each person becomes a living book, a walking archive of human knowledge. And that idea is powerful because Bradbury believed knowledge survives through people willing to protect it. And even when societies fall apart, even when censorship rises, even when cultures become shallow, ideas survive through memory, through storytelling, through teaching, through conversation, and through people refusing to let knowledge disappear. That may be the heart of Fahrenheit 451, not just a warning about censorship, but a reminder that civilization depends on people willing to preserve wisdom. And that's why this book still matters so much, because Fahrenheit 451 is not really about burning paper. It's about what happens to society when it stops valuing thought itself, when entertainment replaces reflection, when comfort replaces truth, and when people become so distracted they no longer realize what they're losing. Ray Bradbury wrote this novel more than 70 years ago, yet every year it feels more like fact and less like science fiction. It feels more like cultural commentary every day. This has been Todd Edwards from TicBite NC. If you enjoyed this deep dive into literature and the behavior and the society, make sure to like, follow, and subscribe. I've been talking about literature. I've been talking about society as it exists today and in the way it exists 70, 100 years ago, and human behavior. And remember, the destruction of knowledge rarely begins with flames. Sometimes it begins with people simply deciding they no longer care to read. And it also starts with people getting offended with what they see on social media and demanding that it be stopped. If you like this story, share it with your friends and family. Share it with people you don't even like. Make sure you follow me on TikTok, Facebook, YouTube. I could use it. Everything's under TicBite NC. I'll catch you on the next one. Thank you for being there.